civil rights author of 3 books, including the historical novel When Black Panthers Prowled America. Welcome to Politics Done Right, Dr. Pam. How are you doing today?
Oh, fine. Thank you.
Great. Excellent. First of all, let me ask you a question. Why did you write that book?
Well, I felt the Panthers are very relevant to what's happening today. But I started writing that book 10 years ago, 15, maybe even 15 years ago, because I was always concerned about racial issues in this country. And the Panthers were a pivotal point in the North and what happened in the North. In the South, we know the civil rights movement was active there, and I was part of that. I went to Mississippi in 1964 as part of the volunteer project under Martin Luther King to register voters. I spent 1,000 college students went down there, although I was a little older than most. And we tried to register voters, and we did not succeed. We did not succeed and 3 of us were killed right at the beginning of the project by the Klan.
So you were with, I don't remember I can't believe I forgot their names right now, but you were a part of that same tour where those 3 activists got killed, I think.
Yes, yes. Swerner, Cheney, and Goodman, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate you. The names just kind of slipped me, Cheney and Goodman. Okay, now let me ask you this. Before we get into the context of your book or the concept of the Black Panthers, etc., you got a lot of pushback. You said you were pretty much canceled from publishing this book with any one of the publishers, right? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I published the book under the name Pam. That is my name. It's my last name. But I concealed my racial identity and my gender. It gave me the impression as a female Black woman writing the book because of cancel culture. Cancel culture today has a concept called cultural appropriation. You may have heard of that, in which white authors writing about Black issues are criticized and rejected as trying to make money off the Black community. Of course, I haven't made any money at all. I've spent money on this project, and that only Black people can really understand Black culture. Cultural appropriation has gone on forever. It's part of artistic license that people can write about whatever they want. Other people can react to that the way they want. But the publishing industry has not wanted to run afoul of cultural appropriation, so they tend not to publish books by white authors about Black subjects. And so that happened to me. A number of agents, a number of editors, and in one case, a publisher, once they found out that I was white, would not publish this, would have nothing to do with this book. And they would have published it if I were Black.
Well, let me interrupt you there, because I want to be straight with our audience here. First of all, I don't quite believe in a cancel culture. I don't. Then that's why you're here. And the other thing that I don't believe in is that white people. I think it is silly to say white people cannot write about, let's say, particularly Black issues, when a lot of Black issues are directly responsible to what white people have done to Black people, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it is quite apt for white people to give a perspective as to what this interracial. I hate to say interracial because I don't really believe in race per se, but we know America as a racial society has actually, it didn't become a racial society because of Black folk or white folks, the interaction thereof that creates this. So I think it is sort of silly to say that, what are you going to write about if you want to write about the issues among races? I'm sorry. So that's the reason you're here. I want to hear your story, and I don't fall under that domain.
Okay, very good. Well, anyway, the book does have at the very end of it an author's note, which does explain why I perhaps misled some buyers by my name, and the picture of a Black woman panther on the very front cover to give that impression, but to explain why I did this.
Well, I don't think, let me just tell you, Dr. Pam, I don't think you needed to do that. I like what you did, which is self-publish. I have 3 books myself, and I asked nobody for permission. I just self-published the damn book and got it out there. So I think I think you did the right thing in the way you published. I don't believe in impersonation either. But that said, is this story that you're talking about here, I think you said it's fictional, but it pretty much it pretty much follow fact-based occurrences. Is that true?
Yes, exactly true. It's a historical novel. And people of my generation, as they read the book, they keep saying, "Oh my God, I remember that. I remember that. I remember that." So the book tells the story of the Black Panther Party through the eyes of a Black female journalist.
Neff.
Who's covering them. Her name is Neff in the book, short for Nefertiti. And she actually falls in love and has an affair, a long-lasting affair, with the head of the Black Panther Party, which was Huey P. Newton, out of Oakland, California, and that's where the Panthers got started in 1967. And as the civil rights movement wound up in the South, having achieved the voter registration legislation that it wanted, our project in Mississippi helped draw a lot of attention to that issue, especially when the 3 people were killed, and then the bridge at Selma, Alabama, that was the last straw, and Johnson stepped in and passed that legislation. So what we set out to do in the South was accomplished, and now all eyes turn northward, and there the Black Panther, the Black Power movement got started with Stokely Carmichael, who had been on the project.
Did you know him?
I met him, but just briefly as part of a crowd. I didn't have a personal relationship with him, but he did speak to us, came to our project. I was stationed in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Also relevant, I met a woman who had been also on the project, and we both went back to school after the summer, both of us to Buffalo, New York, and we fell in love. It was an interracial marriage. We have 2 children, both now lawyers. And our marriage was very much affected by the Black Power movement in the North. And so the Panthers took the Black Power movement to its extreme. What Huey P. Newton did was organize a Black militia armed to the teeth, recruited from ex-convicts and gangbangers. No college students, no intellectuals, just guys from off the hood. They dressed up in black leather clothing and black beret and marched around with rifles and shotguns and confronted the police in the ghetto. And their signature issue was, as it still is, police brutality. So they confronted them with guns. And so the media, when television particularly, went crazy because they had to get these spectacles of a line of Panthers holding rifles and so forth, confronting a line of police holding on to their batons. The tension that something could go wrong here. But things did go wrong. The Panthers had an agenda, and that agenda was they threatened America with civil war, with a guerrilla-style uprising, similar to what the Viet Cong was doing, based on what the Viet Cong was doing in Vietnam. And they were going to shoot police officers, ambush police officers, raid government offices, raid corporate offices, if they didn't get black rights, the rights that black people were entitled to. And they would point out all the ways in which people in urban ghettos were.
Let me interrupt a second, because I don't want the audience to come to the conclusion that, let's say, the Black Panthers was only made up of criminals or folks out of jail or anything like that. They actually had social policies that they wanted to, that they actually instituted throughout the country to actually uplift the black folks. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was going to go there, and you're right, of course. So, the organization, because violence was threatened, Huey P. Newton wanted people that were familiar with it and had resentment at cops, whom they referred to as pigs. That was the word for cops at the time, and also corrections officers, whom they referred to as screws. So the violence came easily to that group, but they were very disciplined. He didn't just allow them to run roughshod. They were very much under his control, and they had a political agenda of certain rights that they wanted: decent housing, decent schools for their kids, sanitation, picking up the trash from their streets, and so forth. But he also realized that he needed to broaden his outreach, as you already mentioned, to the black community as a whole, and not just be this particular group of guys that he recruited. And there he split with his second in command, Eldridge Cleaver. Eldridge Cleaver wanted to start the revolution immediately, and in fact, he did ambush police car, and himself had to leave the country and went into exile in Algeria, where Panthers who believed in a revolution this minute, start it now, start shooting up the police, went to join him. But Huey P. Newton did not believe that. He thought that if we were going to have a revolution and a communist agenda, they would need the support of the entire black community. And so he developed community programs and recruited people into the party. And the party became more female than male even, to set up community programs, amongst them the Breakfast for School Children program, free breakfast. So the kids were going to school. No one went to school hungry, so they could learn. He set up free medical clinics on the weekend, and particularly checking for sickle cell anemia. He set up free legal clinics on the weekend for those who were having problems with the law. He set up a liberation school, a private academy for black children in the ghetto, where they would get a very good education. So he created all these community-based programs, but that would take time. He was not for revolution now. But meanwhile, the police would be confronted in the ghetto whenever they misbehaved, which was often. And meanwhile, of course, in the country, every time the police killed, the police forces were almost always pretty much all white in major cities. Whenever they killed some guy in the ghetto for some reason, sometimes for no reason, and oftentimes unarmed, there would be riots. And he would be and said, "No, we have to control these riots. We have to discipline the entire black community. The state of riots just deteriorate into looting, and that gives everybody a bad name. But we want to make it a revolutionary force, and if need be, we'll have to overthrow this government and secede." But he was very patient and very, very smart, And Panther chapters sprung up all over the country, but all supposedly under his control. But the New York chapter and the Los Angeles chapters were loyal to Eldridge Cleaver, not to him. So there was a split in the party. So what did they accomplish? Well, there was sporadic killings on both sides. Policemen killing Panthers who were resisting arrest, or according to the police, resisting arrest. Panthers ambushing police cars, squad cars, which they did. And then there would be a series of show trials in which the Panthers demonstrated outside. Free Huey, because he was accused of killing a police officer, and very unclear circumstances whether he did or not, or how that happened. He had 3 trials, and finally they gave up because even if one black was on the jury, they could not get a conviction. Nobody would convict him, and so that went on. So that drew the attention of J. Edgar Hoover, of course, because they were preaching revolution. And if you see the movie, what is it called? Judas and the Black Messiah, that recently came out a couple of years ago. They show Fred Hampton in California, who was in Chicago, who was the head of a chapter in Chicago, a very young man. He was only 21 years old.
Got killed, yeah.
He got killed, but he was preaching revolution, kill cops, and so forth and so on. And then he was killed. Pretty much an FBI assassination plot, pretty obviously that. And Hoover felt that the Panthers were the number one security problem in the United States, bigger even than the Communist Party. And so he organized a whole program to infiltrate them, expose them, and get them to fight with each other, which was very easy to do because Eldridge Cleaver and Huey Newton hated each other eventually, and with them, eventually Panthers were killing each other. So that drew his attention. But what that movie is, I found that movie very troubling because they make J. Edgar Hoover doing what he did because he was a racist, purely out of racism, whereas the Panthers were avowedly a revolutionary and communist party. And he could not, intent on fighting the government or agents of the government, like the police, and he had to address them.
Let me interrupt you there for a second because I want to challenge that. You said that he did have to address them because they were maybe in your parlance anti-government, etc. Was a condition of Black people in that time racially motivated in the way they were treated by the government? In other words, were they considered were they given substandard resources?
Yes.
Okay. Were they given substandard education, substandard just about everything?
Yes.
And did they make any types of attempts to change that? Meaning, were there people within the community trying to change that peacefully throughout time?
Yes, but they didn't succeed.
Right. And the next question is, in the genesis of our country, isn't it true that when our original founding fathers, the revolutionaries, didn't get the outcomes that they wanted from the throne, that they picked up arms to fight what was actually what they considered putting them down?
Yes.
So
that was exactly their ideology.
Exactly. So my question is for those who, and again, I'm a peaceful guy, a very peaceful guy, but I am also circumspect in the way I come to conclusions, and I don't know if we should come to the conclusion that Edgar Hoover had this right to protect the state from those who were just trying to acquire rights, right? That's what was the genesis of the Black Panther, right?
Yes. Well, he had to protect the government from an insurrection. insurrectionary force. And so he regarded the Panthers as going too far. The Panthers, on their side, felt that this is what was necessary to do.
So now, as the author of this book, Dr. Tom, sorry, Dr. Sam, I'm sorry. As the author, Dr. Pam, what's wrong with my mind today? As the author of this book, right? I imagine, even though it's a novel, I would love to hear your thoughts as far as because our country has a tendency to put people in different corners and demonize some and not demonize the other. We can take a look at how Brett Favre stole $1 million or more, and it's no big deal, but we get some black kid in a 7-Eleven who steals a candy bar, and it's the end of the world. He gets shot. Guy named Michael Brown gets shot, right? So, we have perspective. And earlier you spoke about people talk about appropriation. This is going to sound funny. I don't have a problem with appropriation. I think everybody appropriates everybody. I have a problem with the financial exploitation of appropriation. In other words, that you can write a black book. I have no problem about that. Or a book about black folks. I write a book about white folks. I have no problem about that at all. The thing about it is we should have equal access to do those things and equal access to profit from those things, right? And from what I've seen, from what you're writing about, you're putting out your perspective, which you have the freedom to do in this country. So going back to where we left off, as far as the section as Edgar Hoover thought he had to do something about the Black Panthers. That's where you were.
Right. Okay. Well, so he went too far. He went way too far, and but it was a very tense time. It was a very difficult time, and there was a lot of violence going on back and forth. So that was one issue. But the Panthers, they were scary, and that's, in fact, I think that was the best thing about them. They scared the hell out of whites, and they still do. Even the recent Black Lives Matter movement was scary to whites.
No. It was scary to some whites
yes, okay.
Because the movement had a lot of whites in it. The Black Lives Matter movement has a lot of white people in it. Absolutely
right. Okay, but it did scare a lot of people, and the president included, the Republicans by and large, at least the ones that speak publicly. But that was what was needed, really, was to scare the white community. And they accomplished something which was not what they set out to accomplish, but it was a wonderful accomplishment, which was they forced urban police departments to hire minorities, to hire blacks. And that's the biggest difference between now and then. For example, in New York City, the police force is majority minority. There are white cops, but they are not in the majority. And that's true, I think, pretty much in every city across the country now. And that also is true for prosecutors and judges. And it was because the Panthers were a scary bunch that white people made these changes to deal with them. So that I think that's so important, what they did accomplish, although there's still room for police reform, obviously, and the Black Lives Matter protest movement, which I support, demonstrated that. So there is that. But my book, traces the Panthers as they go into demise because, number one, they're fighting each other.
You're right about that, Dr. Tom, Dr. Pam. It is always a problem when you start fighting among each other, whether it is fighting among each other in a group like the Panthers or fighting each other as Americans. You allow a few to take over, but continue, please.
Yes. Well, so they were fighting each other, and then they were overtaken and I would say pretty much destroyed by cocaine. one by one, they became cocaine addicts. They were dying from it or hospitalized from it or whatever. But it just swept through their ranks, at least in Oakland, and the more militant aspects of the party. That wouldn't be true necessarily across the country, but the Oakland chapter was, very militant chapter and the leading chapter, and the leaders were all addicted to cocaine, Huey P. Newton included, and that destroyed them. Another issue which hurt them a lot was the sexism in the party. Women members were often given just very menial tasks to do and expected to sleep with the brothers, which they willingly did in many cases, but it was expected. It was expected, and that was demeaning. And
of course, Doctor, that is also prevalent in our society at large. Women continue to be and even though they may not say it explicitly, a lot of boardrooms, that is how a lot of women feel, things that they have to do to get ahead.
Yes. Well, but the women were very much taken with the romance of the Panthers.
Right.
The revolution became a romantic idea. It became, without ever facing what that really entailed. But they loved the concept that they were going to rise up and, smash all the institutions that were oppressing them.
Right.
Without recognizing that they would lose, and their communities would be destroyed, and many people would be killed, and it would be somewhat similar to the Algerian War, where there was no quarter given between two communities, the French and the Arabs there.
Dr. Pam, we're running up on time, so let me ask you to do this for me. Tell me, what do you expect for the person who reads your book, this particular book, When Black Panthers Prowled America? What do you want people to get out of that book with regards to the Black Panthers? What message do you want to send?
That the Panthers were a catalyst, and as a catalyst, they made a major contribution to America. But they also had their problems and overreached in many ways, and eventually brought themselves down, destroyed themselves. But with a lot of help from the FBI, I have to say, and but to appreciate what they did, but also to realize that you can't lionize them, you can't glorify them, that they were really preaching violence and trying to threatening civil war, and in many cases doing unbelievable things along those lines.
And what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
I think you were wonderful. I think you answered all the right questions.
Well, look,
I agree with your attitude overall.
And I appreciate that. Now, I just want to put, and first of all, I like your closing, but I want to put one corollary onto that, because I think more Americans need to see it through the eyes of those who have been aggrieved for centuries. Violence has been, since the inception of this country, applied to the other. Yeah. And to think that the violence from the other is any more despicable than the violence inflicted on them is the problem that I always have. I'm a pacifist in that I don't believe in violence. I always believe conversation can solve problems. But by the same token, I will not ever just simply tell the person who is fighting back that somehow their violence is more despicable than the violence that was perpetrated upon them. That is the thing. I think if Americans were more empathetic in seeing these things, we wouldn't have violence on any side.
Yeah, I agree with that. But the white community needed a jolt.
Yes, they did.
They needed to be scared.
Yes, they did.
To see the consequences of what was going on in the ghettos of Oakland and the ghettos everywhere else. And clear. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Dr. Pam, it's been my pleasure speaking to you, and I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation too.
Politics Done Right depends on you to keep doing what we do. What do? We make sure to keep, number one, the internet seeded with blogs and information to counter the right and to present what progressives represent for the benefit of us all to everybody so that it's not misread, misled by any other entity. We make sure and populate that internet with blogs, with videos, with all these other things to make sure that we are informed and to counter everything that you normally hear that are lying at the right. We also make sure to create articles in magazines, articles in newspapers all around the country to ensure, again, that our message gets out there. Last but not least, we also write books. As you see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, How to Make America Utopia, are two of the many books that I've written on these issues. So please support us in one of many ways. Numero uno, you can support us at PayPal, either one time or monthly. Go to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. You can support us on Patreon. That is politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. Patreon is spelled Patreon. You can support us by becoming a part of our YouTube channel, going to politicsdoneright.com/YouTube, or you can support us in many other forms that you can find at politicsdoneright.com/support. Be sure to visit our store, politicsdoneright.com/store, and get our books at politicsdoneright.com/books.
8 of the top 10 states with the highest murder rates, all are Republican states. How do Democrats not know that? In fact, it's really 9 out of 10. Georgia went for Biden, but it's really a Republican state, or at least a red state. 8 out of 10. And we're losing that message? Crime is higher, as well as taxes here for the average citizen in Texas. It's higher, violent crime and property crimes than in the state of California. 67% higher gun death rate in Texas. Why don't we push back? Why are we
why don't we?
I don't know. In terms of my current point of view, I'm optimistic about our ability to turn this around if we go on the offense. That's why I'm doing the billboards. That's why I'm doing these ads. That's why I'm doing these TV commercials in other states. Take it to them and take it to that damn social media network, whatever that thing's called.
There's a huge amount of political and therefore economic profit to be made by convincing white voters that anything that is good for other Americans, even and including them, is somehow a threat, right? The idea, the zero-sum idea that we can't all progress together, that in fact, progress for people of color must be a threat to white people. So take the student loans, for example. Who benefits from an historic up to $20,000 in student loan debt being, 20 million borrowers, the vast majority of whom are working and middle-class people, the majority of whom are white. The bottom line here is that these policies, the idea of having voting rights in the country where politicians don't pick their voters, but voters pick their politicians, the idea of having affordable college, it's good for everyone. Yeah. And yet conservatives want to break a working class, multiracial coalition to make white voters side with their color instead of their class.
Here is a message, I hope a definitive message to all those who fall for the crap that many of your Republican leaders and others come up with. Conspiracy theories, the big steal, the election is a fraud, all of that. You know who knows the truth? All those Republican politicians that are telling you the lies, and they know the truth. And guess what happens behind closed doors? They laugh at you for believing the crap. They laugh at you and they say, it's not real, but come on, it'll pass. How do you feel being used like that? Those of you who believe the lie, those of you who believe that, if my politician loses, it's because of some sort of a fraud, even as they know the truth, and they're speaking behind your backs of what the truth is. I want you to listen to this piece from La Señora Stephanie Rule, because she hit the nail on the head with this segment. Very important.
The big lie that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump. We hear this all the time from GOP lawmakers, candidates, and all sorts of members of the right-wing media all the time. But on a recent podcast, Texas Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw revealed that behind closed doors in the days before January 6th, some Republicans admitted to him the election was not stolen. He went on to say they admitted to making false promises to their supporters. Listen to this.
There's like, yeah, we know that, but we just, people just need their last hurrah. Like they just need to feel like we fought one last time. Trust me, it'll be fine. And I was like, no, it won't. That's not what people believe. And that's not what you're telling them. Maybe you're smart enough to know that, but so we have a lot of people in the political world that are just willing to say things they know aren't true. And it's a huge manipulation.
For fact's sake, that is a huge manipulation, one with dangerous consequences. Our second fact check tonight has to do with critical race theory and the Republican outcry that is being forced on kids in schools. Well, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin even set up a tip line to help root this problem out. Well, it turns out the tip line didn't get very many tips. And as USA Today reports, most of the calls they did get were for other reasons, including complaints about special education, violations, praising for teachers, and concerns about academic rigor and options. The tip line was, no surprise, quietly shut down back in September. Must not have been as big of an issue as the governor had previously claimed. Our final and perhaps most outrageous and disgusting fiction is actually being spread by some Republican candidates. It's about litter boxes in schools. You know what? We're going to let this guy at a Trump rally explain more.
Kids are coming in dressed up as cats with collars and leashes on and ears, and supposed to have litter boxes in the restrooms.
I cannot believe I have to say this, but obviously there are absolutely no litter boxes for students in schools. This specific story caught fire after notorious podcaster Joe Rogan repeated similar false claims on his wildly popular show. But after some backlash, Rogan says he did some more digging and he came to this conclusion.
It doesn't seem that there's any proof that they put a litter box in there.
No proof. He pushed the lie. Hopefully, that settles that. And now we do not ever have to talk about litter boxes in school ever again. And be sure to tell your friends, the truth matters, but only if you hear it. So listen up.
So let me ask you, are you going to continue, those of you who believe in the steal, those of you who think for some reason that you have to keep this fight up because they're taking away your rights for some reason. Ask yourself, first of all, why are you so, I don't want to say gullible, but why are you so interested in accepting that which was debunked quite a while back? Please tell me, why do you feel the need to believe something that in your gut you should know is false? It may just be you're trying to find an excuse. Think about it. Harvard University director of polling, John Della Volpe, he comes out and he told us before the election that the difference was going to be the vote of the youth vote, Gen Z and millennials, and people that, those people never vote, etc. Well, they came out and they voted overwhelmingly for progressives and Democrats, but more than that, they came out in higher than normal volumes. So far, it seems like 27% of them showed up. It seemed like it's going to be more when we get all the tallies in. But, he came and he said, 40% of these guys are going to vote. Even if it stays at 27%, even if it stays at 27%, the mere fact that they're voting at a lot of times 50-point margins, right, proves the point that he's been saying for a while. The youth vote is the future, but it's more than the youth vote is the future, because the older folks that continue to vote, not overwhelmingly, but substantially for Republicans, well, I tell you what, why don't you just listen to what he has to say?
John Della Volpe, we'll start with you. In terms of the youth voter turnout, there's so many different ways to be surprised here because some of the focus groups that we saw, a lot of young people didn't even know there were midterms, and yet a lot did.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let me break it down as simply as I possibly can, Mika. We just look at, first of all, the majority, the close to 60% of voters in this country who are over the age of 45. By a margin of 10 points, they voted Republican in House races across the country and in most Senate races as well. The Democrats went in with a -10 advantage. It put a tremendous amount of pressure on young people to do two things: A, to show up, and B, to support Democrats. Young people under 45 supported Democrats by 13 points. Young people under 30 supported Democrats by 28. This would have been a red wave election if not for millions and millions of young millennials and Gen Zers.
So, John, let's take a case in your larger point. In Arizona, just looking at the current numbers, Mark Kelly among voters 18 to 29 is plus 56. Voters 30 to 44, he's plus 19. Once you get past 44, Masters wins. So this is a story of the young vote. There's no question about it here. And I guess the question, a larger question going forward is what are the implications for sort of the shifting vote here, which is to say young people by and large going for Democrats, voters, just put it bluntly, who are going to be around for a long time.
Right, Willie, this is not a surprise. We've been talking about this on your show for years now. This is the third election in a row where Democrats have relied on the youth vote to make the difference. In 18, in 20, and in 22, it's the same thing. Republicans now are a small melting iceberg. Republicans lost white, non-college voters under 30. That's the heart and soul of the Republican Party right now. They lost the new generation already with this demographic.
Folks, I mean, so as it turns out, it's a melting iceberg, and this is a melting iceberg that isn't going to refreeze. So as it turns out, as we move forward, it's not a demographic change, it's an American change, folks. And we are headed there, and we are headed there quickly. I simply could not believe this one. I couldn't believe that a host on a national cable network would say this about women and how to get them to start voting Republican. I swear, you won't believe it. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
Juanita, Republicans had another idea for how they can expand their base. I want to share what one Fox News host is suggesting. Please watch this.
Single women are breaking for Democrats by 30 points. And this makes sense when you think about how Democrat policies are designed to keep women single. But once women get married, they vote Republican. Married women, married men go for Republicans by double digits. But single women and voters under 40 have been captured by Democrats. So we need these ladies to get married. And it's time to fall in love and just settle down. Guys, go put a ring on it.
Just put a ring on it. I'm pretty sure
you
Beyonce
cannot make up this stupidity. You cannot make this up, Steph. And it's not just chauvinistic. It's just plain ignorant. Like, you think that's the pitch that's going to get young, independent women on your side? Like, and what kills me is that Republicans are so anti-woman. His response is, get a man in your life to control them. That's the rebuttal here. That's the response here. It's just disgusting. I expect nothing better from those folks over at that other network. And honestly, it just reaffirms how much they are anti-women, how much they hate women. And that fear of women who are independent, that fear of young people, that's only going to continue to grow because you're not getting anybody on your side with this argument. So shout out to the independent women. Shout out to the young people who are rejecting this disgusting argument from the right.
You have to ask yourself, don't these guys read? Don't these guys talk to independent women? Don't these guys talk to women in a manner that, let's say, they can understand? How dare one says, oh, single women, the way to get them to vote Democratic is not try to engage her, but put a ring on it. So the woman is not only now not a woman, it's a thing that you command. It's a it. I mean, when I saw this tonight, I couldn't help but cringe. But here's the funny part about it, guys. You want to know why Michigan is now all blue? Every elective office is, as well as the state house and the state senate. You want to know why the same applies to Minnesota? You want to know why all these other races that were thought to be lost are coming back in such a manner that if the Republicans get a majority of 4 more votes in the House, that's about all they can get when it's all over. This is the reason why. You want to know why women don't vote for Republicans? In other words, most single women and a hell of a lot of married women. It's because that is a troglodytic mentality we're talking about. It's 2022. It's hard to believe that we still have people this way. But you know what, folks? It's our fault. We need to vote and vote appropriately. We need to stop being just single issue voters that they have us nebulously forget about all the other things that they're doing. We need to look at the totality. We need to look at their chauvinism. We need to look at their sexism. We need to look at their misogyny. We need to look at their racism. We need to look at all the isms. It's not that we progressives don't have our isms or even partake of some of those isms, but at least we know it. And at least we're trying to do something about it. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Will is your host. Today we are honored to have Linda Nuno. Linda is running for Congressional District 10 in the Austin College Station. It's a huge area. Linda, welcome to Politics and Right. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I beg you to have a little bit of patience. I have an accent, so you have to be very, very, very careful with this. It's going to be tricky, but it's going to be fun. I promise you that if anything, it's going to be inspiring. Because if I can do it with this accent, with these demographics, with this color, with this gender, I bet that you have a chance, and it's time for you to consider to put your name on the ballot, even if you agree or disagree with my agenda.
Well, look, Linda, tell me a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about your history. Why are you representing 10?
Well, my story actually began when I was 3 years old. I was kidnapped at 3 years old. I'm a former missing FBI child. I landed in Mexico. I was placed in an orphanage for a couple years. We have issues with CPS, kidnapping kids without the proper guidelines, should I say. We have hired people, social workers that are not qualified to render some of the services. And we have a lot of corruption. We have like guardians ad litem, lying on the stand, court reporters who actually do not type what is happening in some of these courts, and it's just corruption all over, right? And I'm very familiar with it. So we had I'm a survivor, right? I know what happens behind these walls. I know that rapes are real. I know the beatings are real. I know the cold showers are real. And we had, unfortunately, 122 kids that died last year, since 2019, if I'm correct. 122 kids that died behind those walls. So that could happen to anybody. That could happen to you. That could happen to me. It only takes a malicious person, a neighbor, an ex, a co-worker, any sociopath that wants to mess with your life can just place a call to Child Protective Services, make a bunch of crap. Forgive my language. I'm very fluent in French. And it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And unfortunately, it has become a business, right? The lawyers stopped working in the best interest of the child a long time ago. Judges are working just for the next election and how to get endorsements and how to get donations, to get elected. And it has become a mafia. And there's no other way to call it but what it is, which is child trafficking. In the worst way possible. Now we're talking about 22 million parents who have gone through family court and have been derailed by the system. And we're talking like nationwide, right? And we have some parents who have suffered the trauma of parental alienation are committing like suicide at unimaginable rates. I mean, it's in every 22 seconds you have an alienated parent committing suicide or trying to threat the other spouse. So I think that mental health care is basic. I think that it's important to prevent versus correct. And the best way is to neutralize the damage that has been already done to our society by putting something as simple as just cameras, on the courtrooms. Judges are working outside the guidelines of the law. They are abusing that discretion in just horrendous ways. They should be acting as elected officials, not despotic monarchs. And that has to stop, right? We don't have the need also as well for court reporters anymore. We are not in the 1800s. This is not the 1600s. We have something like a software that is Dragon, right? And a machine is not going to type something that you do not say. So there is not bias. And we have to ensure that evidence is actually what is evidence in the basic, definition of it, not whatever you can present in court, right? Or you are allowed to present in court. So the problems that we face are very complex. They're very diverse. And now we're paying the consequences of that. And that's one of the things that inspire me to run. I have been a victim of police brutality. I have been a political prisoner. I was in the July 4th during the summer of 2020 protesting against ICE for the separation of kids at the border. Because the reality is that it doesn't matter if you have papers or not. The reality is that the government is still, destroying the family unit, and by whatever means necessary, right? And when you put money on the table, and I have to send from Congress, a check of $20,000 per child to the state in order to support them, which is bullshit, because those funds never get to those kids. Then we have a problem. And it has opened the window to despicable tragedies out there.
Now, tell me a little bit about your district. What's the demographic of your district? How many? Is it a mostly Republican district? Where is it?
It's completely Republican. I mean, the only little pockets of more diverse kind of thinking, more progressive thinking, are the cities, right? Or towns that we have like a strong, well-known universities, like in College Station, with Texas A&M. I went to Texas A&M. I studied child development there. Travis is extremely diverse. We do have some progressive thinking. It's still like a battle over hill, but we're doing it. And we need you to get involved. And you may not live in Texas. This is not the message. You may not be one of my constituents, but I need you to go vote. And once you cast your ballot, and you should start thinking and devise a strategy to put your name on the ballot on the next cycle. The elected officials are not doing anything. At least that has been my personal experience. I have heard thousands of cases. I have helped hundreds of people, and things are not changing because we're not changing legislation.
Now, you decided to run in a district that would be difficult. So what I imagine as well is you wanted to send a message. Every single district must have somebody to vote for because you never know.
I think you're too smart for your own good. You know that.
Yeah, well,
I think you're the very first one who catch on that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Now, here's an interesting thing. In as much as your district is very very Republican, it turns out that there's some kind of a cheating that seemed to have occurred in that I think there are some people being mailed votes. They're mail-in ballots that had them voting in precincts that they're not supposed to be given the redistricting. Correct?
That's correct. You see, this is the thing. Just like you, my platform is bigger than my district, right?
Right.
So when I went viral during the unlawful arrest and the sexual assault that I was a victim of, I went viral, right? And I had like 48 million viewers on Facebook, and I had another obscene number on Twitter, and everywhere we're talking about that. Now, the problem with that is that I think they feel threatened because I made a petition on change.org with the title "I Demand a Female Officer," and it got like 347,000 signatures, right? So that's a lot. And when I saw that number, and when I saw real people actually being empathetic and caring about my child, I was like, you know what? This is an opportunity. It comes with responsibility. It comes with a responsibility to do something about it. So I think they got threatened a little bit just because of the message or what I represent, right? And although my district may be Republican, the system has failed both ways. I mean, a cop is not going to stop and ask you if you're a Republican or a Democrat and then shoot you. The family court system is not going to ask you if you voted one way or another. No. So we all have been failed by the system in one way, at one degree or another. And it's time to do something about it. It's just time to clean both sides, the establishment per se. Both establishments are rotten. Don't let them tell you otherwise. Don't let them use
That's the activist in you coming out. That's the progressive activist in you coming out. That's in other words, let's get the message out. So let me ask you, Miss Linda Nuno, why don't you give me a closing statement that you want everyone to hear with respect to our body politic?
You don't need to tell me. You don't need me to tell you that democracy is at stake. This may not be 1776, but you have to fight for your country. People younger than you were willing to die for the land that you're stepping on, sacred land. Countless of sacrifices has been made every single day since then. The least that you can do is to get up on your ass and go to vote.
Linda Nuno for Congress, Texas 10. Folks, check her out. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
A pleasure as always. Thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please.